Now that you've had some time to get in front of class and you've given your speech, now we need to talk about what is important in your speech. Obviously, your data, the information that you're wanting to exchange is important, but also your introduction. When you think about an introduction to a speech, kind of like a concert. If you've gone to a concert to see a band that you like, or maybe it was an opening band, and have you ever been to a concert to where the first song wasn't good? You know, that sets the stage. Did you know that we make our first impressions on people the first 30 seconds? And this is with interpersonal relationships. You either like a person or you don't like a person within the first 30 seconds. But it's also like that whenever we hear someone give a speech. If we look at their nonverbal facial gestures or listening to them, maybe they're monotone, maybe they frown, whatever it is, the first 30 seconds, that can make or break our listening. So it's important to have a good introduction, and it's important to have a good conclusion. You might have a good introduction and have some good points, and then you mess it up in the conclusion. Again, this is just like a rock concert or any type of concert you go to. The show was pretty good, and then at the very end, they completely messed their songs up. You know, that's what you're going to remember. We'll talk about that here in a second. So now let's talk about what's important when it comes to introductions and conclusions. And how can we do a good introduction? What's the purpose for an introduction?
To say that the introduction needs to be well planned is an understatement, considering how important and yet how brief this portion of any speech is. As a speaker, your task is to ensure that your introduction convinces your audience to listen to you. In other words, an introduction is kind of like a persuasion statement. You want to persuade the audience to listen to what you have to say. And our purpose of introductions is, number one, to get the audience's attention. You want to let them know that you've got something important to say. And you want to give the audience a reason to listen to you. You don't want to get up there and look unprepared. You want to be able to introduce the subject. What is it that you're going to be talking about? Then you want to establish your credibility. Do you remember which one of the three modes of persuasion we said deals with credibility? Was it the logos, or ethos, or pathos? It was the ethos. And this lets the audience know that you may have some type of expertise in what you're talking about. And then this also gives you an opportunity to preview your main ideas, especially if it's a longer speech. We won't be doing speeches this long in our class, but out in the real world you may have to give a 15 or 20-minute speech. So introduction gives you a good opportunity to talk about what you're going to tell the audience. And what's the purpose of conclusions? Well, it's similar to that of introductions. Let's say that you finished your speech and you've given a good introduction and you made your points valid. You backed up your points. Now it's time to let the audience know that you're finishing the speech. You can also summarize your speech in a conclusion, but this works if you have a long speech, maybe 10, 15, 20-minute speech. In our purpose, in our class, we're not going to have speeches that long. If you think about a summary in a 2-minute speech or 3-minute speech, you don't want to spend 60 seconds summarizing just the first 2 minutes of your speech. But a conclusion can also provide closure to the audience, and it gives you a point to open up the audience to questions. It's just like having a good introduction. You want to get the audience attention, and you want to let the audience know that you conducted the speech in a professional manner.
When you're in front of class, you really got to work on your vocabulary. We said that giving speeches is different than normal conversations. We don't use slang or a lot of vernaculars. We want to be professional. We want to enunciate, pronounce our words. We don't want to speak too slow, and we don't want to speak too fast. We need to find that like the Goldilocks principle. We want to find that good middle ground. We want to use different inflections. There's a lot going on. But the vocabulary that we use, that helps set the tone. We need to work on our vocabulary, and we need to work on our pronunciations.
When we speak, we want to use our words concisely. We want to avoid cliches. Don't use 5 words if you can use one word. And you want to avoid a lot of jargon. Jargon is good for tech terms, but if you're going to do some tech talk in front of the Rotary Club, you might want to stay away from jargon, unless you let the audience know what the jargon means. And colloquialisms. This is words that we use in our culture. You want to stay away from colloquialisms. This is a lot like jargon, in a way. We don't want to say ain't, when we're talking, in a public setting. We also want to look at our cadence. Our cadence, this is our rhythm. You don't want to speak monotone, so you want to use, and the book talks about repetition and parallelism and antithesis, and you want to look at all those. It's in the book. But let's look at the rhythm in our cadence. Think of a cadence as, like a, you don't want to put the audience to sleep with the same rhythm all the time. Sometimes you want to speed it up, and sometimes you want to slow it down. And then you want to pause. We said pauses are great in between your thoughts, and this helps break up that cadence. But we don't want to have a fast cadence or a slow cadence. We also want to look at our inflection. This keeps us from being monotone. For example, if you're giving a speech and you said, "Recent does not necessarily mean a story that broke just last week or even last month." An inflection is where we can raise our voice and lower our voice. In other words, you could say, "Recent does not necessarily mean a story that broke just last week or even last month." If you noticed, I used inflection with raising my voice and lowering my voice, and also broke up the cadence a little bit. I slowed down a little and I stopped, or I sped up and I slowed down. That's part of our cadence, and that's part of our inflection.